Talking now, we're talking politics with Director of the Integrity Institute, Dr. Bryce Edwards. Bryce, kia ora, good morning. Thanks for your time today.
Good morning, Marina. Andrew.
First up, wanting to talk about the COVID-19 inquiry. Now, there's been significant, some reasonably high level resignations from the COVID-19 inquiry, and hey, some people want to make another conspiracy theory out of this because it's got the word COVID-19 in the title. However, I just wanted to unpack that a little bit. When you have these supposedly politically neutral Royal Commission of Inquiries, certainly having senior officials resigning partway through the process isn't a good look.
Yes, look, this is a good topic to discuss. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of information on it, and mostly we have to speculate on what's happened here. But this is a big deal because just to take you back, of course, the last government put together a royal commission, an inquiry into this when they were in government. And it had very narrow terms.
Yeah.
It was set up in a way that looked like it was meant to give the right answers to make the last government look good,
Hmm.
not deal with some of the more gnarly issues around vaccines and so forth, and the mandates. But the new government coming in just over a year ago, I think,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
forgetting what time we're at, a year and just about a year and a
Year
half,
and
in
a
fact.
half nearly. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, they agreed to do a new, a second phase of the inquiry, and all those three parties of the current government had criticised the last Labour administration for their inquiry.
Yeah.
They wanted to excuse me, Andrew. They wanted to widen it out. They want to look at the vaccine debates about the mandates and have a more critical look. And so they got in new people, and they hired some, I think, very respectable, reputable people to lead this inquiry. But now three of those people have stepped down. So the
Mm.
executive director, that's Helen Potiki, has stepped down, and two of the senior lawyers involved. All three of them have a very strong record
Yeah.
working in the public sector, good reputations, but out of nowhere, suddenly they've resigned. And so there are some speculations, and I think the government is sort of trying to, push this idea that maybe there's competency issues and the inquiry weren't delivering. The government were trying to get them back on track,
Yeah.
push them to some new timeframes, and that these people had trouble with that. I think more likely, I mean, that might be the case, but more likely, there's just so much politics involved
Yeah.
because the three parties in government have all wanted quite different things from this inquiry. So they're sort of pulling it in three different directions.
Mm.
And yeah, I think you can imagine New Zealand First want much more focus on those mandates
Yeah.
and on the vaccines and having a bit more debate about how that went. And I think, yeah, National probably a bit more wanting to look at the competency of the last government
Hmm.
and how they operationalize some of the COVID issues. So the inquiry's got, kind of different masters asking for different things. So uh, I suspect that's at the heart of these things, that it's quite hard for a royal commission to operate when it's being given different
Yeah.
instructions. But having said that, just briefly, it is a royal commission, so they are supposed to be quite separated from the government of the day in what they're doing.
Yeah.
Um, but of course, it's politics still, and there's always ways.
Certainly is. I wanted to just touch on that briefly because essentially we've got a situation where we're using a Royal Commission of Inquiry to beat up on the last government. There is a political aspect which we can't ignore, but in some ways, is that any better than using a Royal Commission of Inquiry to whitewash? Nothing to see here. We did a great job with COVID. I mean, you've
Yeah.
got examples of either of those with the COVID inquiry, I suppose.
Oh, look, that's right. And no, I think it's entirely appropriate that the new government has put together their own inquiry and that this inquiry is looking at the last government. And, it was such a huge episode in New Zealand history that it does need scrutiny. And, by and large, I think we can say they had lots of successes, but they had some major shortcomings too,
Yeah.
and caused, there was all sorts of harm caused, I guess, especially in terms of social cohesion. And so, we do need something like this inquiry to look into that and draw up the ledger of, good and bad.
Yeah.
But yes, we might find that the people that are leaving this inquiry have some beefs with the government having, leaned on them.
Yep.
I don't know.
Mm.
But certainly royal commissions of inquiry are the top, types of inquiry. They
Yep.
are meant to be independent, and it would be, yeah, it would be a real shame if there's been political interference.
And certainly, if we can have this conversation about what happened and what was possibly done wrong, rather than it being about what they did wrong,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think it's always regrettable if it becomes a sort of partisan, game of rugby
yeah,
about, your side was good or bad, our side was the opposite. But if we can move beyond that, hopefully, there were lessons to be learned, shall we say,
yeah,
from that COVID experience. We're coming up now to what is the 5-year
mm,
anniversary
yep,
of the lockdowns, and you know, uh, in some senses, I think we have moved on too fast,
hmm,
and we just, because it was kind of a dark time in lots of ways, that we just want to sort of forget about that and move on with our lives. But it was a monumental time.
yep,
And so, and I think it is still affecting our politics, our society, our economy,
yep.
even. So we need to learn those lessons.
Also, wanting to talk about this new special zone, Shane Jones, King of the North, well, self-titled King of the North, at least, has got good news for the folk in the Marsden region. There's this special economic zone or special. Is this just another way of Shane Jones saying no planning permission needed here?
Yeah, I think partly. Look, this sounds a bit bureaucratic and boring, but I think it's a big story that's going to develop over the next few months. So you have to remember that the Marsden oil refinery used to be where the oil companies bought in the crude oil, made it into petrol, diesel,
Yep.
etc. And that was closed down in 2022. New Zealand First have always campaigned that we should be reopening it. And so part of their coalition agreement was to have a study to work out, whether we should do that. Essentially, it's come out as being quite an expensive option.
Yep.
So basically, Stan Jones, as regional development minister, came out yesterday saying, well, actually, it's I think he used the word stupendously expensive. It would cost somewhere between I think it was $5 billion and $16 billion for the government to reopen that oil refinery.
Yep.
But they've come up with another option whereby they encourage that area to become the new sort of energy hub
Hmm.
for New Zealand,
Yep.
and that they promote it as an area that we do lots of, I don't know, importing of LPG and use that as the processing area, and lots of other energy and extraction things that could be done in that area. And Shane Jones's idea, which he's got the agreement of the government to proceed with, is to look at whether we could get rid of lots of laws,
Yep.
essentially,
Yep.
lots of regulations for a geographical area, and say this is a zone that if you build a business in this area, maybe you won't pay tax, you won't pay GST,
Wow.
you won't have to abide by the RMA or local council laws. We'll give you an exemption from all these things to kind of encourage you to build up your business and be profitable, employ people. And these are quite fashionable around the rest of the world,
Yep.
particularly I think in places like China and Russia,
Yeah.
but also Western countries. And yeah, they have some proponents, especially in business and on the right, that think, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could just get rid of all regulations just for this little zone? And and it can just be this oasis where the government doesn't interfere, and we can let businesses just do whatever they want. And so that's what they're looking at. It's a bit like the Fast Track Act on
Yep.
steroids.
Exactly. It's kind of like let's take petroleum and add some anarchy. See what happens next.
Yeah,
Uh,
indeed. And so there will be lots of proponents of this, and there's some logic behind it, but also it needs huge scrutiny
yeah,
because we don't want to just create a Wild West
yeah.
where anything goes.
Marsden area is the New Cayman Islands for petroleum in New
Yeah,
Zealand. I mean, the obvious thing, I suppose, for this one is there are vested interests for Shane Jones. He
yeah.
has got some context and some influence in that particular part of the world. It sounds like favours for your mates, particularly if you consider if we're going to have a place in New Zealand which is the hub of distribution of energy infrastructure. Why put that at the pointy bit up the north of New Zealand in terms of distribution? It doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, look, I can't comment on that except for the fact that it's Shane Jones is part of the country.
Yeah.
It's his electorate that he keeps trying to win. It's a New Zealand First base. He's battling for the regions. New Zealand First have also at times talked about doing similar things in Southland and
Yep.
Gisborne. Those are parts of the country that, yeah, struggle a bit, and they're looking at ways to revive them. But yes, this is something of a free pass to businesses to get around all those pesky things like paying taxes to help us have hospitals and an education system and stuff.
Exactly.
So,
And
yeah,
doing something like this in an isolated part of the country, just, okay, it saves money for the businesses, but the infrastructure cost on getting that energy to the other parts of the country that actually use it, of course, yeah, it has some fishhooks, let's say. Hey, Bryce, appreciate the work that you do at the Integrity Institute. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us today.
thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.